Hello and great day, everyone. It is May 6th, 2011. This is Shane and Josh from Wash Your Brain, and we are here today with Ralph Ring. Ralph is well known in the UFO community as being outspoken regarding hidden technologies, as well as the power and importance of consciousness. He is an experimental technician who worked closely with Otis T. Carr. Hello, Ralph, and thanks for being with us today.
Hello, good day or good evening to you. I'm not sure what your time scale is there, but it's just 8 o'clock here in sunny California.
Wonderful, and thanks, Josh, for being with us as well.
You bet, Shane. Very happy to be here with Ralph.
Ralph, if you don't mind, please begin by telling our listeners a bit about yourself and the life you led up until around the time you met Otis T. Carr.
Okay, I will try to brief it because there's been a lot of different things on the website that people can connect the dots with. So I'll kind of streamline it along.
Excellent.
I was raised where I'm at now in Paradise, California, which is located between Mount Shasta and Sacramento. And it's just up from a town called Chico. And I was raised here when I was young, my sister and I, and we went to a country school. We walked 7 miles round trip every day to school. So the best part of my learning in my entire life has been in the woods. I've learned lots and lots about natural law. And it wasn't until later when I came out into the world that I found there was a different set of laws, civic laws, that didn't mesh well with nature. There seemed to be a lot of controversy and a lot of force, unnecessary force, where things could go rather smooth, and there seemed to be a lot of force involved. I eventually went overseas. I had a little training in school in the Jesuit Catholic college in Hong Kong, China. Continuing school, I learned a lot about different things there and came back to the States. I wound up in Santa Cruz, California, where my parents were at the time. I got into science pretty heavy. I remember one day in the science class when the teacher said that bumblebees can't fly. I looked out the window. There was a bumblebee there talking to me. And I decided then to go back to nature. My academic learning wasn't going very fast. And just a week in the woods, I learned more than a month in school. So I stopped schooling academically then and went back to nature. Let's see, I bring this up to date here. Well, I eventually went into the service in California and went to Guam. I was in the Transportation Corps. The Korean War broke out. They drafted me into the 3rd Division, 7th Regimental Combat Team, and we made the Wonchon landing in North Korea. I went through that experience, which was very heavy. There was a lot of casualties. There was a lot of very cold, damp, and uncomfortable conditions over there. I got wounded 4 times and kept getting sent back to the line. I eventually got out. I got back to the States and was discharged in Presidio, California, and started to look how I could put my physical life together, aside from being a military combat veteran. When I looked in the papers, they didn't seem to have any jobs for combat veterans, especially machine gunners or heavy artillery or mortars, which our company consisted of. So the only thing I could count on was my experience on Guam of skin diving. I did a lot of diving and loved the affinity that I found with nature underwater. So I started a skin diving business in San Francisco, and it just overnight took off. So there wasn't many divers around at that time, and the business, it skyrocketed. And it kept building up to where I was proud enough to, my folks lived down the coast. My dad lived in Santa Cruz. My uncle, one uncle was in Monterey, and the other uncle was in Newport Beach, California. And they were, very, very successful people on many levels. And I didn't want to go down until I could put a handle on something I could be proud of. And so I did, and I went down, and I started working out of the Newport Beach area when I met a lady. We got married and eventually had 2 children. I was still doing a lot of diving at the time, And I was approached by a dive boat from U.S. Divers Company. That's Jacques Cousteau's, invented the aqualung. And they were located in Santa Ana, which was just a stone's throw from where we were living. We were living in Costa Mesa at the time. And they pulled up and asked me, they'd heard about my diving. I did a lot of extra diving to make extra money, and it wasn't dangerous to me because I took very careful control of the conditions, and I never had any serious problems. So they asked me if I would like to come in for an interview. I went in, and they hired me right away to work in their research and development department, working with the aqualung and the various diving apparatus that they had. And I eventually got on to perfecting the wraparound mask. They had distortions in it, and I had to find a way to get it out, which I did. That lasted long enough to where I was having rumors sent back to my wife that there was some dangerous conditions. I ran out of air at 250 feet and so forth, which is nothing to a diver that knows there's no danger. But to my wife with kids at home, she got really upset, and she decided to prompt me to do something else so I could be home more often. Well, at home, my whole house was a laboratory and a machine shop, and I was always inventing these little things at work. And one day she gave me a newspaper ad that said that this company, the name of Advanced Kinetics, was looking for a lab tech. And I said, well, I don't have it. I'm a machine gunner and a diver. And she said, no, you've got all this stuff that you put together with garage sale paraphernalia, etc., and making it work. Just go in and see what you can do. So I went in, and I wound up with a job there because they had just lost an engineer that was working in magnetism, and my fortes all my life has been magnetics. One of the things that saddened me when I came back out into the crowded world, if you will, next to the woods that I'd lived in all this time, the cars, the pollution and everything was pretty obvious. And I thought, well, you know, it's quite simple to use some natural laws and get things off the ground. And I always thought that we should be in floating homes, floating cities, floating countries, really. I mean, just using natural law, this can all be done. So I set upon an idea that that's what I wanted to do. Well, the job they gave me was a job that didn't last very long because they were using force to fire electrons through a magnetic field and without deflections, and they kept increasing the power, the Gauss. They wanted me to keep pushing this poor little electron through the field. And they gave me an oscilloscope and a Polaroid camera, and I had to keep track every day of what I did. And it didn't take me long to realize that I wasn't going to go anywhere, because the more force you use, the more deflection there was to the positive or negative field on the magnet. So I was getting a little discouraged, and the guys on the next workbench were working on levitation. They had these just giant coils. They were called iglotrons in those days, and they were burning them up about every so often. They'd have to go check another one out, and they were quite expensive. And all they were doing was levitating a steel ball for about, I think the longest I've ever saw was 3 or 4 minutes, and then I'd have to go get another coil. So I took both of these ideas home to my living room floor, where I usually conducted a lot of my deep, in-depth scientific work. And I tore apart, tore apart the television and so forth, and got the magnets and the cathode ray tube out, and duplicated in very amateur way the experiment that I had at the lab. The one I had at the lab was probably up to $100,000 worth of equipment to operate what I was doing. And at home, I think I put this thing together for $100 or so. And I had learned in nature, you don't force anything. You just go with the flow of things, going, it's kind of meandering and breathing in and out and so forth. So I did the same experiment, only this time I pulsed the signal. In other words, I took nanoseconds, well, not quite, but I took seconds to allow the electron to do what it wanted to do. And it wound up spiraling through the center of the field. And the first one went through without deflection, and the next 20 or so went through without deflection. So I thought, I'll write this up and take some pictures and look for a raise. I thought, well, I solve this little problem quite simply. You just have to pulse the signal. And there's a big difference between force and allowing nature to breathe. Then I thought about the levitation experiment, and I just took a 15-inch woofer speaker, put it on its backside, hooked up an audio amplifier, and started putting different objects in the center of the cone, and using the variable to go up and down the scale until I found that I could levitate a ping pong ball. And I left it there overnight, went to bed, I woke up, it was still there. Again, I wrote up this experiment and took pictures and thought for sure I was going to get at least a pretty good raise. Well, I took these in to Dr. Weinhardt. He was head of the institute, and he took a look at them and he said, yes, I see what you're doing and so forth, and there's something here you're unaware of, that you're working here for a government-funded research and development facility that is paid to look for answers, not find them. So this kind of discouraged me right away, like, what? And it blew me completely out of the water, because I thought that's what you're supposed to do in life, make something better, make it work, and keep going. And he said, no, you're not allowed to talk about this. Don't go talk to the engineers. I'm going to have to shred this, go back to work, I'll give you more pay in your envelope, and just be quiet. Well, that lasted for about a week.
Yeah.
I got really bored. I got upset. In fact, I had tears in my eyes the day I just shut down my equipment and walked out. I just couldn't take it anymore, because they defied the simple laws of nature in place of the physical laws that they wanted me to work with and use a lot of force to get results. So, long story short, I was a little discouraged. I got a lot of heat when I got home, because my wife wasn't happy that I'd walked off my job, and I had to find something else. But in the meantime, my neighbors came, and I was talking to them about what had happened and how simple nature works and operates. So why don't you come to one of our meetings? And they had meetings every week. And it was just a few doors down. It was a couple of blocks, I guess. But I went to their meetings, and there were some brilliant people there with simple little ideas that they put together, little machines that they got working and stuff in their garages and their back porches and stuff. And I told them what I did and what my dream was. And when they heard what my dream was, they said, well, there's a guy in Oklahoma by the name of Otis Carr that's building spaceships, and your idea sounds like spaceships. I said, yeah, well, that would work. So they said, well, he's having trouble back there. They're calling him a fraud, and don't think that anything he has is workable, and so forth and so on. And just let us get in touch with him and see if he will come out our way, and we'll fund him to come out here and bring his entourage and find you guys a place to work together. So long story short, they did, and he came out with his people. They had about 6 or 8 engineers and the physicists and PR people and so forth. But Carr and I hit it off right away. They put us up in a cabin up at Lake Arrowhead, and while we were trying to find a facility that we could work in. And I got to know Carr real well, and he revealed to me, he worked with Tesla, by the way, for 3 years. He met Tesla. He was working as a clerk in the New Yorker hotel, and Tesla would send him out for peanuts to feed the birds or something with, and he got acquainted with Tesla. And Carr was a sponge. He loved science, and so they got together and studied and everything. And Carr eventually said, "Well, I'll take over," because Tesla had trouble with the money people about what he was doing in both Colorado Springs and in Warden, which is in northern state of New York. What Tesla had run into was when he said that he could transmit power without wires. The money people, at that time, J.P. Morgan was holding most of the strings. He said, well, you can't do that because you're going to, interfere with the economy. We have telephone poles, we have lumber industry and copper industry, and you're going to disrupt things. So Tesla spent years putting everything together in Wardenclyffe, a giant facility that was ready to go to start transmitting power through the earth, bouncing it off the ionosphere, around the earth, and everywhere to other receivers, a girdle around the earth. Just 12 receivers were all that was really necessary. And the money people said, no, we're not going to go there. So said, tear it down and just forget all about it. Well, through a series of events, they wanted to shut a lot of Tesla's ideas down because they were working purely on natural law. They didn't adhere to a lot of the science that was popular at the time. So when he met Carr, he wanted to share with him as much information as he could and told Carr, I'm not going to make it in my time, and you go on in your time, and if you don't make it, keep passing it on until the idea of natural law comes back into full realization and you're getting back to a very natural condition.
What year was this that you and Carr became acquainted specifically?
It was 58 or 59.
Okay. And how long had he been working independently of Tesla at that time? Or did you know?
It must have been quite a while because he created the OTC Enterprise company in Baltimore, Maryland, and beyond, and it was quite a facility. And then he went ahead and built prototypes and tried to get his patents through. He went to the patent office and with the levitation idea intact in his patent, and they said, there's no way we're going to patent this. You're talking about resonant frequencies and vibrational and we're not going to do this. Pull your levitation specs out of the patent, and we'll give you a patent on an amusement device. So Carr eventually, reluctantly, did. He pulled the information out of it, but he wrote a book called Dimensions of Mystery, where he coded all the details of levitation. He was hoping someday when people are simple enough in their thinking again to see the simplicity of it, they would read this and decode it. He talked about the animals and the birds and how things synergized in nature. And he knew that someday someone would come along and say, well, there's levitation, and somehow plug it back into the system and make it work.
Is that book still available? Dimensions of Mystery? Is that in print?
Mystery. Yes, I have the book, and I did put it on one of my discs. It's not on the website yet, but
okay.
If people are interested, I'll see that my webmaster puts it on the website and people can get it. It's the transcript, the whole Dimensions of Mystery is available to the public.
Excellent.
And if they care to take a look at it and decode it, we'd have levitation again.
Wow.
Can we talk about the OTC X1? And can you talk about what helped you finally decide to move forward with it?
Well, when I talked to Carr, he was like no one else I'd ever met. He was completely in alignment with natural law, and he referred to Walter Russell and Schomburger and people that I loved in their work with vortex mechanics, and Heisenberg with the principles that he found out, so that we had what's called quantum mechanics in operation. But when Carr and I got together, we went to very deep or higher levels because we realized that craft that we both wanted to see happen could never, if it was allowed once to be known, it would never or could never again be shut down because it consists of consciousness. Mm-hmm. That when I get into the details of what we did when we built it, I'll talk more about the consciousness involved. But
definitely.
We did stay up for many, many nights, Carr and I, and went into the ethers, if you will, to the technology available beyond the physical laws. And him and I saw that it was quite simple. All we have to do is do it. But we realized there's a tremendous amount of resistance from people that were either already happy with the system they had, or there was a lot of investment in the petroleum and the automobile industry that didn't want to see anything else happen. And he told us from the start, told me anyway, from the start, we were going to meet with a lot of opposition because nobody, first of all, they don't want to believe it. They didn't believe how simple the principles were. And secondly, it would fringe on changing the monetary system. And it didn't have to be overnight. It could be a gradual thing, but eventually he knew that we'd have to get off the ground. The automobiles are vastly coming to the end of their cycle. They have put down cement and asphalt and everything to run all right over the garden that we used to have, still have in parts, but eventually they called us and they said, we have a lab for you. it's the OSBRICK, I think it is, Osbrick laboratory was suddenly available to us. The people that had built it or something changed their minds and left the whole laboratory there.
Who called you, Ralph? Who let you know that this lab was available?
The people in the Understanding group. The name of the group that I was a part of was called Understanding.
Okay.
And it was created by a fellow by the name of Daniel Fry, and it had a lot of people involved, and we were all looking for a better life for everything, for humanity. Okay. And so they were the ones that sponsored and brought Carr and his entourage out to California.
Okay.
And put us up. So they called, and we had a radio show going at the time, too, that coincidentally was a part of this group. It was called Galaxy. It was a transmissions from other worlds, if you will, talking about principles involved in the simplicities of nature that were not prevalent in those days. Anyhow, that was the name of the program, and I think I have that on my website so people can, if they want to listen to the radio show that's available. But they were helping us as well get things together because they felt the importance of change necessary to keep things natural. So they called, they said, we got a lab, and it was in Hesperia, Apple Valley, California, down near Victorville. Big, beautiful laboratory. I mean, a facility. It had a lab, it had machine shops, it had the office facilities and bunking facilities, had everything there that we needed. So we got together and started working day and night to start putting some prototypes together, something that we could, advance to the next level, hoping we could find a manufacturer that would help us get things going. And we had small prototypes, and we were operating them around this Apple Valley area, and quite successfully, no problem, all levitating discs.
Wow.
It came to a point where we were operating on our shoestrings. Well, we had lots of help from all the people, but it just was always short. I mean, we were always eating hamburgers, not steaks, and I was a gopher for them. I'd go for hamburgers as well as work in the lab. So anyway, we did get to a point where we had some prototypes that we thought, let's take it to a manufacturer and see if we can't get somebody to help us. Well, our PR man at the time, his name was Major Wayne Aho, well, retired. He was an intelligence officer in the service and worked with the UFO Blue Book, I don't know.
Project Blue Book, yeah.
And when he joined us, he was absolutely enraged that there was so much being held from the people, so many ideas, so many wonderful things that could be available to the people were being held back, shelved, or buried. So he said, well, I'll call General Motors, and he did. And they said, we'd like to have a rep come out and talk to us. We want to show you something, and we'd like to take it to the next level. So they did. They sent a rep out. We met in Riverside, California, and we went into the conference room. He had quite an impressive group with him. He had, 2 or 3 engineers and a couple of physicists, and there was about 8 or 10 people. And we took our device and put it on his desk, levitating just about 4 inches above the top of his desk. The engineers and so forth started right away thinking that it was a remote control, and so they asked us to take our jackets off, etc. And they thought we were using some kind of, operational device on our bodies, and we really weren't.
Okay. Now, when you're saying that, does this have to do with the conscious interface with the object that you're talking about? Was this?
Yeah. Yes.
And they thought that you were controlling this object's movement, the disk's movement, with a remote control rather than how was it really being controlled? Can you touch on that?
It's a state of what's called magnetic resonance. It's when you resonate with anything, long enough, like tuning forks, one side to the other, or musical instruments, you can pluck one and the other will ring. Resonance is a very, very powerful force, and when you use it and combine it with magnetics, this is where the consciousness comes in. Carr and the group, all of us, would sit around at night and talk about consciousness and what it is. And he would explain that, I thought it was a joke when he first said, all you guys are not really here. And he said, you're just a figment of imagination. And we thought he was joking. And then he went on to prove that, we are really energy, and that we are experiencing what's called a human existence in a water vessel, because we ourselves create that. And we thought, well, this is really, really different. We wanted to know more. And he explained that the world we think we see outside of ourselves is being created by consciousness in what, for lack of a better explanation, nanoseconds. Yeah. These cameras, our eyes, are working at so many frames per second, 24 and a half, I believe. And that's a certain frequency that it's able to, or frequencies that it's able to conceive of and pick up. And by consciousness, we are creating the world in front of us so fast that we don't realize it. We just think it's always been there and it always will be there. But actually, every nanosecond, it's all new. It isn't the same thing it was a nanosecond ago. So he was explaining how consciousness works.
So what you're describing in a certain sense is that he was a man way ahead of his time, but in the same sense, this is also knowledge that's very ancient knowledge as well, in some sense.
Oh, indeed. Yeah. And he brought this from Tesla. I think Tesla was way ahead of his time as well, because a lot of this came from Tesla through Carr, although Carr was quite adept and he knew quite a bit about what he was talking about. And when I was in the lab, when I worked at Advanced Kinetics, we had an electron microscope, and I became friends with some of the guys. And I went over, he asked me to come over and have lunch with him. And we were sitting around talking about what we're talking about now, life and energy and so forth. And he says, well, who do you think you are? And I said, well, I'm me, and blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, let me see your finger. And he put it under the electron microscope. Well, he had a certain kind of a thing that he put on my finger. And then I looked down through it, and he says, well, what do you see? And I said, well, I can't see my finger. And all I could see was energy. And he said, that's right. He said that you go down into this dimension where he was I don't know what the magnification was, but he said that's all there really is. It's just energy.
Wow.
And he says you're imaging all the rest of it. And imaging's good, and it's what we have in a physical reality or third dimensional reality that brings things into which is supposed to be a very pleasurable environment to experience and to have fun with. Yeah. But when it's misused, then it can go into create a chaos of very uncomfortable conditions. So I remembered that, and then when Carr was telling us, and he said, well, yeah, you're just consciousness. We all are. And he says, more than that, we are all connected. It's collective consciousness. And let alone the rest of the universe right now, just concentrating on this spaceship we're on, which is planet Earth, we are all connected. We're all really of one gigantic consciousness. And when you have a thought, that thought will ripple all the way through the consciousness, one way or another, whether people pick it up or realize it or not, it's always there. It's always going to be there. And that later I found out is what's referred to as the Akashic records, that they are stored within our DNA and they're there forever. So that being said, he went on to explain that we are not who we think we are. We are really magnificent creative beings that have been watered down, and I'll get into Shane's area here a little bit about mind control and brainwashing and things. Because we've been programmed for long periods of time by people that wanted to take advantage and misuse some of these ideas to fill their own pockets. And Freud gave them away through understanding psychology, that you can start programming people and tell them eventually, well, this is what you need and this is how you do it, and so forth. And so they eventually got everybody in the same state of mind, just forgetting who they really are. Who they really are is consciousness and a state of intuition that operates that consciousness, that they work together, they synergize between the heart and the mind, not the brain, but the mind, they operate. And when people forget that, they start thinking, well, all there is just life and death and toil and work, and that's it. But that's not the truth at all. That's far, far from the truth. So Carr was explaining, if you buy into what your brain is programming everything from what it's hearing, and your brain is just a computer that has a job, and that it's a third-dimensional job, and that is to operate your body, to keep all the organs and all your all your systems working perfectly. And it's really not interested in anything outside itself. So when you start talking about anything that you're inspired to talk about or imaging about, it doesn't really care much about it. I was told in school, don't use your imagination, that's not going to get you anywhere, get back to your bookwork and so forth. And I later found that was the greatest power we have, is our imagination, because you create with it. You create your ideas with your intentions and so forth.
I realize that is a really huge subject, that probably the way that the consciousness interacts with the machine. But if I could just take you back a little bit to so you're in the room with the GM representatives, and if you could kind of describe what happened there in relation to all this. So.
Well, we resonated with the device itself. Mm-hmm. We resonated with an empowering energy that activated it. We did this consciously, and it rose off the table and levitated. And this is a lot simpler than it sounds. It's not a sci-fi movie or anything. It's really very simple, but it requires a great deal of understanding who we are, what we are, and what resonance is and can do. Anyway, they checked us for wires. They checked for everything, and they examined it quite thoroughly and admitted it was working, but it couldn't, because it's violating the laws of thermodynamics, the second law, and so forth. It couldn't work, but it was working. And so they verified to the rep that, there's something here we don't understand, and that's as far as they could go with it. Well, the rep looked at it and looked at us and said, well, what are your ideas? And we said, we'd like to get the wheel off the ground from a vertical position into a horizontal like this, and we want to have homes, habitation, and transportation in the same vehicle. Before there were automobiles, there were horses, and now there's automobiles, and now we're ready to go to the next step and get off the ground so that nature can go back to being a garden instead of a trash bin.
Yeah, blacktop.
Right. Yeah. So he got furious. He said, there's just no way we're going to help you guys. Do you realize we've got hundreds of thousands of people working for us that count on a paycheck? They've got to feed their families. They've got kids going to school. They've got programs that they have to take care of. And you're going to take that all away instantly. And I said, no, it doesn't. Nothing has to be, Carr said, nothing has to be instant. This can gradually seep in the same way automobiles did. It doesn't have to be instant at all. But this device, along with being just a vehicle and a home, can be used in the existing homes right now. If you will allow it to operate the electrical system, things have to be changed a little bit, but these can operate the existing homes right now until we can get things moved along. And by doing this, by taking the energy worries away from people, you will allow them to be who they really are. They've come here as incredible musicians or incredible technicians, or they're gods by comparison to what they think they are. And we could have a wonderful world of creators that would keep using their natural talents and using a system of exchange that far and exceeded the benefits of the monetary system that was in existence. We could just go back to a super barter system and find whoever needed this and whoever needed that would find each other and have a wonderful time with it. It would be win-win-win all the way around. Well, he didn't want to hear any of this, and he said, no, that's not going to happen, not with General Motors. And we did explain a little bit to him. Well, not much, because we didn't want to tip our hat too much, but we did explain that this is not a new idea. Actually, the BMW motor car company in Prague in the early 40s had already done this. They had already produced levity discs. They were using a different principle. They were using Schellenberger's ideas of vortex mechanics and so forth. And they were using magnetism, but they were using electromagnetism. And in our devices, we're using pure magnetism, which actually opposed to the German. The Germans came in and got that, incidentally, and got the technology and the craft and started developing it. You probably heard of the Bell. That was all a spin-off from BMW when they built the levity discs. Well, they were trying, and they did mount weapons on those vehicles in those early stages. But the ones we were working on, weapons are totally obsolete. There's no need for weapons. You don't have them because we have a consciousness that deals with the essence of love. Everybody loves their job. They love what they're doing. They love their environment. They love each other. There's no need for anything that opposing that. And the craft can never have accidents. So I remember an insurance guy telling me one time when I mentioned that to him, he said, well, that puts us out of business. You're going to ruin the insurance company because if they can't have accidents, then there's no need for insurance. Well, anyway, on and on that went. And so this guy finally said, you guys are outlaws. You're working outside the laws. I said, yeah, your laws of physics, but these are natural laws that are been going on forever. We've just gotten off the path somewhere and forgot. And we're not using them anymore. We're using synthetic ideas and replicas of what they might be, but not what they are. Well, the rep showed us the door. He said, take your junk and get out of here. And I'll tell you, Mr. Carr, if you guys put those up, we will shoot them down.
Wow.
We're going to oppose any ideas you have of getting these things off the ground. So I knew we were far out. It is a far out technology, and in essence, it's called ether technology. It's understanding the ethers for what the ethers are, and that's just another name for zero-point energy or fifth-dimensional consciousness, which we're now. Some of us are already there. Some of us are working into it every day. We're getting closer and closer to closing down a third-dimensional consciousness, and we have to be ready pretty soon to accept fifth-dimensional consciousness, which is dealing with the oneness instead of the duality of life and what it is in natural law, and accepting the fact that the old techniques, the old habits, the old ways will not work. The third-dimensional ideas won't work in a fifth-dimensional consciousness.
Exactly. Speaking of old concepts and ways of doing things, could you talk a little bit about how your craft were confiscated?
Sure. Marcia just prompted me to steer you guys to the operation of our larger craft. So
yes, if you could do that first, that would be great. Explain to us how they're operated and perhaps the process of achieving resonant frequency.
Sure. When we got done with Mr. I don't know his name from General Motors, Carr, we all went back to the lab, and Carr said, now it's just a matter of time that our cover is going to be blown and they're going to be looking for us. And we were pretty secluded, and we didn't want to be known in the area till we had something working that people could start accepting as a better idea than what they had. Yeah. So Carr said, let's go back, forget these prototypes for now. We had actually 2.5 45-footers. Well, there was only one complete.
That's a 45-foot diameter?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
And he said, we're going to take that one, and we'll run some tests, and when they're complete, we'll take this baby and fly it around the world and just ring bells and whistles or whatever we have to do to get people to notice there's something they don't understand going on. And it's up to their government or their superiors to look into it and tell them. That was our idea, that we'd start waking people up.
Yeah.
So we went back to the lab and we worked around the clock. I remember we were sleeping on the workbenches. We were trying to get everything going, and we finally got to a point where Carr said, "Okay, tomorrow morning we're going to test this." And he said, "But before we do, I want to explain to you guys more about this consciousness to you and what's going on. If you bypass the brain." In other words, let the brain do its job, honor and respect it for what it's doing. It's keeping this vessel operating for you, but that's not you. That's just your machine that you're operating in the third dimension with.
Yeah.
What you are is mind, and you are in a collective consciousness with everything and everybody. And what I want you to know is when you get on board the craft, you're going to let your brain go to sleep. And that means just clear everything. Don't let anything come into your brain at all. And he'd already briefed us on the idea that everything is already good. Everything's already perfect. Everything's already real. That was reinforced all through my life now ever since he told us that. And I found that to be true. That there is nothing but good. But you have to you have to really understand what that means. And he said that you're going to be your brain is in fear. It's going to feel it's going to lose its identity if you just use the mind. So you have to just say, let it go to sleep, be quiet, and leave us alone, because it's going to attack you with, this is ridiculous, this is impossible, what are you doing, and so forth and so on. And he says you'll get all those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thoughts, and they're all repetitious. They all go around in circles and really go nowhere. It's a series of revolution.
Yeah.
And what you need to know, and by following your intuition and your mind, is evolution. By spiraling or following vortexual motion, which everything in nature does, you elevate your consciousness. So he did point out that being connected, we are already everywhere. Actually, and this is a hard one for the brain to wrap around, and I don't expect you guys to get it, because it took me a long time. But actually, there is nothing really moving. There is nothing really happening except when you create it instantaneously. And this is again, back to nanoseconds. It goes into the creation itself, that we image everything we do, and we create these gigantic civilizations with our minds. And in essence, it's just energy fields that we're perceiving through our veil of forgetfulness, I guess you could call it, where we deliberately forget the unlimited power we have, and focus on a more denser manifestation of energy, meaning the third dimension, etc.
Yeah.
He also said that we're going to be going downrange 10 miles, and the engineers have already been down there, and they found that the area that they choose the craft to go to has been figured out to be in the light spectrum, the color of aquamarine. It's the resonating at that field, at certain frequencies. And so when you get on board, you're gonna see the crystal fire up. You're gonna see a lot of different colors, and then eventually it will go into aquamarine. And that's the time I want you to just praise your brain for what it is, love it, and just say, yeah, just relax. We're not going anywhere. Just don't let it get excited. So we did. The next morning we got on board. We went, and I'm just a lab tech. I'm just a country boy at heart, and that's where I learned all about everything I know is from nature. But I do know natural law, and I do accept what I'm hearing and feeling from working with intelligence that makes sense and not nonsense.
Yeah.
And so I realized that I was, along with being a lab tech, I was the gopher. I mentioned getting hamburgers and everything. But Sarah and I had such a synergy. We worked so well together. He said, no, I want you to go. I thought there was going to be 3 engineers, but he said, no, I want you on board. So I was very, very blessed to be so honored to be able to go with these 2 engineers. So we got on board, and in the center of the craft there was this crystal about, maybe, I don't know how big it would be, probably 24 inches around or something, I don't know. The beautiful crystal. It was all faceted, so you could see the tetrahedrons and the double tetrahedrons.
Oh, yeah.
And so they fired up a laser from underneath, and this thing lit up. Oh, man, it was beautiful. It started like from infrared and then all the way around to ultraviolet. I could have sat for a week and just tried to count millions of colors of red, and then yellow, and then, there were just so many colors, but they all faded around. It was incredibly beautiful. Then it started kind of pulsating, and it went into the color of aquamarine. And when it did that, the whole ship lit up. And I could feel my brain saying, this is a bunch of colors and lights. There's nothing going to happen here. I could feel those things, but I didn't allow them to enter my consciousness, because I was just focusing on what we were doing. And that intention was to move this craft from point A to point B and back. That's all I was,
Yeah.
So when this brilliant color lit up the ship and everything, I thought, okay, well, I felt that I was going to go somewhere and we were going to, get out and do something. And nothing happened. Nothing at all happened. And I thought, well, God, I guess maybe there's something not working. We'll have to find out. And in those days, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any ways of communication that I knew of, but I could hear Carr, and we could hear Carr in the craft just as loud and clear as I can hear you guys. And he said, okay, boys, that's it. Come on down for debriefing. The experiment's over. And we thought, well, we looked at each other, and I would have bet $1,000 that we didn't do anything because we didn't experience any change at all. We went down and we said, well, it didn't work, did it? And he said, well, what makes you think so? So we didn't go anywhere. He said, well, I told you about the brain, and the brain will fool you. You teleported. You went outside. He said, time and space are also part of your illusion. They exist only in the time that you wish them to exist. But in a greater reality, or in ether realities, there is no time and space as we think there is. So what you did, you actually teleported from point A to point B. You went downrange 10 miles, and we said, well, wait a minute. No, we didn't. We said it in a respectful way because we knew he was a lot wiser than we were about this stuff. And he said, well, empty your pockets. And we had these little jumpsuits on, and they were fresh because we didn't take any of our personal gear on board. We changed into the jumpsuits before we got on board. And I knew they were empty. I didn't have anything in my pockets, and neither did the other guys. We started looking in our pockets and then pulling out grass and sticks and stones and everything and putting them on his desk and stacking them up. And he says, wow. He says, you didn't go anywhere. Where did all that come from? We had no idea. We said,
wow.
I don't know. And nobody got on board. I mean, we didn't, we would have been aware of anybody. None of that happened. And he said, no, it's simple. I told you, it goes to its optimum capacity and then it shuts down. Anything beyond that, it can't conceive of it. It just won't go there. You went there with your mind and you came back and you said, yeah, well, what does that mean? Well, the whole craft went there and you went with it in your consciousness.
It is unbelievable. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the events that led up to them coming and confiscating the work that you guys were doing?
Sure.
Yeah.
So after the experiment, he said your brain might take weeks, months, or years, or maybe never to accept the fact that that actually happened. Well, now I have almost total recall of it happening. I too remember it. And
wow.
Years after, when I was giving some lectures around the country, an email came in from 2 police officers that were in Apple Valley that had actually seen us. They were out on patrol, and they saw our craft come in and down at that designated spot. They saw us get off the craft for a few minutes, get back on board, and disappear. So we had a documentation there, and that's still in some of my records somewhere where they.
That's incredible.
Wow.
So you guys were the UFO occupants then in this situation.
Yeah. So after that, Carr said, okay, tomorrow, basically their time was just not set and cut and dry like that, but he said soon, and that meant tomorrow, we're going to take this craft now, and because it had the capacity of becoming visible and invisible, all we did was increase the frequency so that the retinas aren't picking up any more 24 and a half cycles because we're operating at 30 cycles or whatever you want to say. I don't know how to define it any better than that. But it can't see us because it's not operating in that. It's operating only on a linear scale in a limited time frame and dimension. So anyway, he said, okay, we're going to get this baby going. We're just going to go all over the United States. We'll start with Los Angeles and do whatever we can. Just make all the noise, lights, everything we can to get people to look up and see there's something up there we don't understand. And it's round and it's hovering and it's coming down and it's going up. And he said, we've got to get some exposure now because they're going to be looking for us. Well, we were getting ready to do that, and we didn't go the next day because the next day or two, I forget what it was, because we had some other things that we had to do. We were finishing a test on a 3-foot model, and this might be of interest to you. this
Oh,
3 foot
yeah.
model. We sent resonant frequencies to this 3 foot model, and it was made out of T6 aluminum. It was a good solid aluminum, and I remember touching it as we were starting it up, and it was nice and solid. And they kept increasing the frequency, the vibrations, and I kept touching it, and eventually it felt like jello. It was just kind of wobbling, and I said, "Wow, this is really strange." And then eventually I put my hand all the way through the shell of this T6 aluminum, which immediately my brain said, "That's impossible. That can't be."
Yeah.
Carr was over there kind of almost laughing, although he knew what we were doing. And he told us later, "I told you, your energy, when you reach resonant frequency of anything, like it changes. You're just going back to energy. You're not a body. You just think you are," et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
So anyway, that being said, they a couple of days later, in came these big army trucks loaded with soldiers. There's 2 semis loaded, packed with soldiers, and they got out and ran up to the labs and the warehouse. And these other guys got out of these cars and they had badges on, FBI badges and so forth. And this guy had a document, a piece of paper, and wanted to see Carr right away. So we came out and stood with Carr, and he said, "This is I don't know what he said, like cease and desist, and we're confiscating all your equipment and everything." And Carr said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, you're attempting to overthrow the monetary system in the United States. This can be considered an act of treason, and you can be held responsible." So
Wow.
they went into our offices and got all our blueprints, our everything. They started going into the shop and tearing up our workbenches and stuff. And they took us away and started interrogating us and talking to us, and told us, the long story short, that we weren't to ever come together again, or ever try this again, or even get in touch with each other again, because we're going to be watched for the rest of our lives, et cetera, et cetera.
Ralph, did you feel like your physical safety was in danger during that encounter with those gentlemen?
No, because, and this might sound strange, because Carr said they can't kill you. There is no such thing as death. And this sounded like another big, story that we had to get through.
Sounds like you guys had began to achieve a resonance with your consciousness in a certain sense, so that you weren't even afraid anymore, is what you're saying.
Right. There was no fear. There was the feeling of being very, very cautious and very, very quiet, not to say too much that they could misconstrue or whatever. But we knew, and we didn't cause them any no resistance. We answered their questions and everything. And because Carr said that, don't ever offer anybody any resistance. Always accept them as your friend. Because in essence, they're just giving you a lesson. And you've got to be thankful that you're getting a lesson from your adversaries or from your enemies. And always thank them for it. That was Carr's philosophy. I had some rather choice words to say about the whole thing, but I didn't choose to even think them. I just went along with realizing that in order for the craft and ether technology to be accepted, it had to be tested. And these were just tests that will happen and have to happen before the reality can come into being. Once people have exhausted all their tests, then there's nothing else left to do but to let it happen.
You viewed this as part of the natural process of maybe even just another step in the process of this technology being released at that point.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, this was part of kind of the larger process involved. And how did they eventually let you go?
Well, they wouldn't even let us go back to the lab. I remember now I went back to Costa Mesa where my wife was and so forth, and I told her the story, and I said that they're going to be watching us and stuff. So, and she wanted me then to take a book I had of Tesla's. I had ordered it from Yugoslavia, and there was a great big thick book with all the patents in it. She said, "Get rid of this, get rid of all these little toys you got running around here with no wires on them, because if they come in here, I don't want any trouble, and we've got a family." So at that time, I'd heard of a guy working in the desert in Joshua Tree, California, by the name of George Van Tassel. He was a test pilot for Howard Hughes and all the stuff that Hughes did with his aircraft and the Spruce Goose and so forth. But he had retired and he was an Air Force pilot, I guess, is who he was, and he decided to retire in a place called Giant Rock, California, and get in touch with what he felt he had earlier been in touch with, extraterrestrial intelligence, extraterrestrial beings that are coming and going all the time, but will not resonate with humans because of the violent responses they get. The nature of humans is very volatile, and they didn't want to engage in any form of communication until they realized that wars and killing and so forth are not necessary for a good life. So he retired out in Giant Rock, California, or Landers, California? Yeah, Landers, California. And he started communicating and doing things with extraterrestrials out there, and he built what was called an integratron with the technology that was being sent to him via his consciousness. But he needed some Chesto technology, and I don't know how I knew that, but when my wife kicked me out with all my stuff, I had his book, and I somehow heard or knew about him, and I found myself driving down to the desert to where he was located. And I remember I had this book under my arms, and I started walking up, and there was a big giant rock there, and he had a little restaurant right next to it. And I started walking towards the restaurant, and the door opened, and here he came. He came out, and everything went into another dimension. I mean, everything kind of slowed down, and I felt really, really good, but the best I've ever felt.
Wow.
As we approached each other, I said, he says, I know, I've been waiting for it, just like that. And, oh man, I felt,
wow.
I felt that I was being guided from, a super source that was guiding me to do these things. And how I got there, I didn't know either. But so anyway, we talked a little bit, and he said, this will help him complete his work on the Integratron. And I said, well, I better get back. And he said, well, rest before you go. Go over there and rest. And he pointed to an area that it was kind of a grassy field. And I went over and laid down because I was exhausted. I was really, really tired. And I laid down, and I looked, and I was laid there for a while, and I looked up, and I saw not hundreds, but thousands of lights, spaceships, or whatever they are. I didn't even know, how in those days. But these things were coming over. They were coming down right over my head, not further than, I'd say 100 yards away, and then shooting off in all different directions. There was just thousands of them all over and I thought I was seeing things, but it was beautiful. And I didn't know till later that I was being saluted for giving Van Tassel this book. I mean, it was just some kind of a deal that operates in a higher, I still to this day don't know.
That's terrific.
They probably threw you a party.
Yeah, they did.
They did.
This is something I would like to know. Do you see technology as artificial or natural, or do you think that there's some technology that is artificial and some that is just natural?
Well, I'm sure of the Black Ops and what they've been doing. They tried to use magnetism because they knew they knew what Carr had, and they knew that it would work. When they took our craft, they took the 45-footer, I found out later. They put it on a lowboy or whatever and took it back over to Los Alamos, New Mexico, and put it underground. And I didn't know this at the time until years later when I was building a replica of the craft in Prescott, Arizona, where I started building a home, a underground home there. And at Yavapai College, where I was giving a lecture on how to build a home for nothing almost, and making it all work on free and abundant energy. I was using solar panels and water. For water, we were using air wells. We were using solar panels, solar hot water. We were using everything and being completely happy. We were using ham radios for communication. We could talk around the world on those for free in those days. But anyhow, at the college, this professor was giving a lecture one night, and he said, this is the Freedom of Information Act, and I just got back from Los Alamos, New Mexico, and I saw a lot of things there, and he was explaining what he saw, and he said, well, one of the things was down on the 9th floor. I was going along, and I looked into one of their bays, one of the big compartments there, and there was the OTCX-1.
He called it by name?
He just said it. It said he didn't even know. He said it was an OTC something on it, and
Wow.
I knew that was it. He he was trying to get as much information as he could, but everybody was told to don't tell him anything around the whole facility. And but he did get, I guess, one engineer and found out that they had tried to mount weapons on this craft, and they tried to operate it, and they didn't understand it. But by trying to mount weapons on it, it would explode. They would fire back. They would just explode on them. And so anyway, when I heard that, it was a confirmation to me that, you know, there are sinister ideas and people, places, and things doing things which belongs to everybody, and they were, you know, trying to make war machines out of something that would be good for homes or cities or anything else. So, Sean, you wanted to know more about something mind control and stuff? I don't know
Yes,
too much.
I was wondering, at Wash Your Brain, conditioning, programming, and mind control are something we focus on. I was just wondering if it's something that you have noted for yourself or seen.
Well, Marcia and I have been, you know, I've never stopped since we were building these things. We had moving parts in those days, and then we accelerated, and I've been quietly building them in my mind and then physically building them as well for years now. And we went into solid state circuitry, no moving parts, digital, if you will. And we've gotten to a point now where there's large groups of us. We call them pods. We have one in Hawaii. We have one next to the Canadian border in Idaho. We have one in Arizona, in Sedona, Arizona. We all are like horses at a gating post, waiting for the right time to introduce what we have. And what we have is free and abundant energy that we want to invite people to partake of. That we feel is going to be very, very soon now. Nature has come in to help us now by showing people you might want to think about getting off the ground with the advent of what happened to Japan and is happening all over the world. So that's kind of giving people the idea that maybe they should talk to people like us and find out what we can offer them and maybe give us a break in getting things off the ground. But in the interim, I know we've been watched. I know my phone's been bugged and all that stuff going on. It doesn't bother me a bit because if there's nothing that can harm us except ourselves. And Carr ingrained that in us. He says, you don't have to worry about anything. The only thing that can harm you is if you let it. And Marcia's been with me when we've had threats and things. Our lives have been threatened. In fact, the last talk I gave for noetic science up here in Paradise area, just before the talk, I had a very sinister phone call on my cell phone, incidentally, that said, talk at the risk of your family and friends being a great risk. And that was it. And I looked on the phone because you know I've got caller ID, and there was nothing there. There was no trace of the call. Yet I know I heard him loud and clear. So those things have been going on, and I just said, okay, they're just playing their little games again, you know, and that's what they've been doing all this time. I'd be having coffee somewhere, and somebody come up and sit down and say, you know, something like, remember what you've been told, and keep your mouth shut or something, and then they'd leave, you know. And I just kind of laughed them off because, you know, it's just, they can't stop the truth. And that's what Carr and Tesla and I have been working with, is the absolute truth that there is a greater world to be had than the ones we've been told exist and that we should live in.
I have a couple quick questions for you that I think my higher self was just shooting them into my mind here, so I think I need to ask you them. Have you worked with, I heard you mentioning the noetic sciences. Have you worked with astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell at all in his Institute of Noetic Sciences?
I've been a member of Noetic Sciences for years. I haven't met him personally, but I do honor his efforts in putting it all together and making it all possible for people to come and share their ideas and so forth. But personally, I haven't met him, but I know of his work and his philosophy, and I love it.
Oh, wonderful. And the second question I had for you, and this just came into my mind like a bolt of lightning, is that I'm very familiar with Edgar Casey's work, and a lot of the concepts that you're talking about with relation to this sort of unity, almost technology, is what I'm thinking I'm calling what you're doing or what you did. Is similar based on the crystal in particular that you talked about. Casey described ancient Atlantis and Atlanteans as having extremely advanced technology that was based through the manipulation of crystals, large crystals, and the use of light and consciousness and crystals in conjunction. And this sounds exactly like what you guys had begun to discover.
Well, I think it's all related, and I think the past and the future are really in the now. I think we're under a veil of actual forgetting of the past and not recognizing the future, which is good, because one of the other things that Carr reminded us of in being in a state of being, stay in the now. Because if you take the past ideas of solving a problem that you come against in the future, it will never work. You'll go around and around and around in circles, because you've already had that problem and you've already tried that technique. So you have to forget the past. It never existed anyway, and forget the future because it isn't there yet. And just live in the now and allow your intuition to guide you, and get rid of all your excess baggage. Unload your brain and your house with all your junk that you've got, and just know that when you need it, it will be there. And that's what we've been operating on. For years, we've been just like the seat of our pants trying to get through what we're doing with our little laboratory experiments and everything. And it just happens. We needed a lab here recently, and the guy from Chico State, retired professor that had access to all the shops, the plastic mold shops, the machine shops, the tool and die shops, heard about us and came up and offered us. He has the keys to this day. He's retired, but he says, these shops are open to you guys anytime you're ready to use them, and I want to put some prototypes together. And that's what I mean about, and that's what Carr was trying to explain. When you need it, it will be there. You don't have to hoard things. You don't have to.
I was going to say, I love hearing you mention all these locations in California, because I'm right here in San Francisco, actually, and
Oh, okay.
I spent my day at the Presidio actually today. So I love hearing you mention all these places nearby. Just a question related to this: how do we get off the ground? What's the key to bringing this type of technological change to the world? What's the next step that has to happen? Nature's telling us, as you said. Nature's started to show us and kind of stepped in. I think the sun is doing it. I think, I think that's apparent. But what can we do?
Well, in keeping with what we were talking about, natural laws and everything, what I'm about to say is so simple you may overlook it, but you are doing it right at this moment by taking the time to listen to my story. You've already accelerated the whole idea in the consciousness that it go wherever it goes. It doesn't matter if it doesn't go any further than what it is now. But it's just that you have taken your time to engage in our time and foster the ideas of a better world, a better reality, one that we already know exists.
Yeah.
So and by not using anything from the past to solve the future problems. Just live in the now and use your intuition to the fullest. And that's each one of them. And because we are really connected, and I won't get into that, but one of the pods in Hawaii is called the Elders of the Round Table. And I happen to be the eldest. And under me is Elizabeth Rauscher, who is a 3-time nominated for the Nobel Prize. She's a brilliant physicist. And then we had there were 6 of us on the board. And over there, we're working with the Resonance Foundation. Nisam Harriman was originally called the Resonance Project, which we spun off of to build spaceships. And we have gone to a point now. These spaceships are not just for habitation and transportation, but they can be scaled down to operate in someone's home by changing the light bulbs and everything around. We can have small models in everybody's home before we even get things off the ground. But anyway, that being said, I had to go back and forth. I commuted back and forth to Hawaii regularly for months and months. Marcia at the time was in Phoenix, and I was in Las Vegas, and I got really tired of the getting ready, finding the cheapest fare, the best fare, the way to get to the airport, the security drove me nuts. All of those things were bugging me, and because I was really busy doing other things. So I told Marcia one time I've had it. I'm not going. I'm going to have to pass going there because I didn't want to do that anymore. but I really didn't want to, and I was expected to be there because I was a part of the group. So that being said, time went on, and I found myself at the next meeting around the table. We were talking, and one of the guys asked me, "Well, how was your trip?" And it struck me, and I remembered there was no trip. I did not have a trip. Uh, just a little while ago, I was sitting at home, and now I'm here. And beyond the scale of linear time, somehow it happened where just a few minutes ago I was home, and here I am. But I couldn't say that or do that at that moment, and I invented. I knew I invented a flight. Like, oh yeah, it was great, and I had corn chips on the flight or something. I don't remember what it was, but I built in the entire scenario in my mind as it had happened, and it was documented because I had the tickets. When I was home and looked at my briefcase, I had the tickets from the flight, but I didn't.
Had the proof.
But I swear to you, with everything I swear to you that I was at home and then I was there, and then
well,
later.
I tell you, I believe it because I've experienced that same phenomenon. It's
All
great
right.
to hear you say it.
Good.
And then to feel your mind, the mind create, like you're describing, then create afterwards. Have to create the narrative afterwards.
Yes. Oh you guys agree.
Along those lines, we've talked a lot about how technology is reliant on consciousness and our spirit. You talked about the OTCX-1. They attempted to mount weapons on it. That didn't quite work out for them. Do you feel that they've figured out these various principles and theories we've talked about enough to use technology for other sinister needs, such as maybe keeping people from discovering natural law?
Oh, indeed, and it's full force right now more than ever. In fact, if I can use the word I know I'm splitting it into duality because actually we're all one and we're all playing a tremendously good game, and the bad guys and the good guys are already one guy, and we're really supposed to be having fun, but we're not. But if I can split it for a minute and say the guys with the black hats are really, really getting quite anxious right now because they know they can't hold their cover very much longer because consciousness is breaking through. The white hats, if you will, are just being who and what they are. They're not trying to hide anything. We're not trying to do anything different. Just we're waiting for the times to change because the first law that we follow in nature is what goes around comes around. So whatever they're doing will come back on them. If it's not in the best interest of everybody, shame on them because it's going to bounce back on them. And that's starting to happen. We expect the entire monetary system to go down within the next few months. I mean, it's really, really changing rapidly.
We already know that we've won. We were just watching it happen.
Yeah. I agree with you 100% there, Ralph. I feel like I've already seen it happen. I think many of us that are, have seen it. It's already occurred. It's already happened. We're just waiting for it to unfold.
All right, well, we want to open our doors, if you will, and I'm just playing with you right now, but we want to open our doors and start flying our ships all over this place within the next few months. That's a little boy's anxiety here, but that's what
I live in Canada. Come pick me up.
Yeah, you're speaking our language, Ralph. You're speaking our language there.
Right. Okay, that's great, man. That's
real quickly here, and this has been just a really incredible conversation and a real honor to talk with you. Have you had any other, or you or your family had any other encounters with anything that you would consider, and I almost hate to use the term extraterrestrial, but even maybe extraterrestrial entities, intelligences from elsewhere? Have you had any direct contact that you'd be willing to share with us?
Well, I think like everybody else, I think we have them daily. We just don't realize or recognize it. It just depends on the gravity or the importance of the situations because none of us are really operating from an ego standpoint, trying to, expose ourselves to anything. But if we have a message to pass on to one another, just a split second passing on the street, we can send that message to each other, and we know we're in good company, or we know that we're operating on the same frequencies. And that can be from anywhere you want. It could be from outer space, inner space, or it doesn't matter. It's just we're really, and this is another thing Carr said that might resonate with you, that we are already everywhere. There isn't any place we're not. So teleportation is just a changing of the mind. It's not a changing of any body or going through space or anything. It's a changing of the mind, the consciousness. That
I had heard the phrase, there's nowhere to go. You're already there. I had heard that.
right. Oh, Marcia just reminded me. There's a fellow in Denver, Colorado, Stan Romanek. Romanek?
Yeah, Stan Romanek. He's the abductee that draws all the equations. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yes. Well, they honored me one time. That was in when? 2007 or 8? The head of the Institute for Rick Nelson, the head of the...
As an Institute for Anomalous Phenomenon?
Something like that.
Yeah.
He was working with this Stan Romax. The whole university was working with this guy.
Oh, yeah.
And they invited me up. They said, Stan wants to talk with you. So they paid my way up and everything. I met with them up in Denver, a little above Denver. I forget the name of the place. But I met with Stan, and he was telling me about all these experiences he'd had and the ETs that were coming and going in and out of his life, some of them driving him absolutely nuts.
Oh, yeah.
And so he showed me a video that he'd taken with his own camera at his back door, and it showed this image going back and forth and coming right through the glass. And he said, that gives you an idea, but he said most of them are not, they don't mean to be harmful in any respect. They just don't understand some things. But they told me, because of your background and what you guys were, trying to do to reintroduce, because spaceships have always been here. We just forgot about them, and they're still here, and we just don't see them.
Yeah.
But anyway, he said the beings that come to him have this information, and they want to pass it on to you because they cannot interfere with the consciousness of this world due to a galactic pact regulation somewhere. But they can pass the information on to me, and I can pass it on to the people that I work with, and we can change things before we blow ourselves into oblivion or something. So I said, well, what are they? And he gave me stacks and papers with all these diagrams of different symbols that I didn't understand at all. And he says, as far as he knew, this is Stan talking. He says, as far as he knew, this information will make all metal anywhere morphable. That you can morph anything with this. If you understand these symbols and you work with any metal at all, gold will become obsolete, and copper will be you can change anything you want with these symbols, so that you guys can go ahead and build your craft and make them out of cardboard if you want. It doesn't matter. So that's what Stan was saying. Well, I couldn't make any sense of it, so I took it back to our group, and they came over from Hawaii and studied them. And one of the engineers was terribly excited. He said, "Oh my God, they're that far or something." And he says, "Let's take this back and we'll work on this, and we'll stay in touch." Well, I hadn't heard much more from them till I started seeing these things around California, actually, in the skies that were appearing and disappearing. And the cameras zoomed in on them, and I saw these symbols on some of the sides of these craft that were appearing and disappearing. And it was traced back to a company in San Jose, or somewhere, I think it was San Jose, California, called...
Were these the symbols from the carrot documents?
Yeah, carrot, yeah.
The carrot documents, absolutely,
right.
Yeah.
And those are the same symbols that Stan Romanek gave me to pass on to the engineers. And these things would appear and disappear, and they were interfering with things. And I understand that they...
they saw them in Big Basin. They saw them, a couple places.
Yeah, and as far as I know, they were black ops. They were not for the public to know anything about.
Yeah, so, they were blinking in and out of visibility.
Right. That's
correct.
I'm sure you've met lots without knowing it, but have you ever encountered an extraterrestrial face to face?
Carr might have been one. Yes, I have to answer that affirmatively. Yes, I mean I have to, because when you meet a gentleman or a gentle lady that has all her ducks or his ducks in a row, in other words, they are polite, they are generous, they are well spoken, and their alignment with your consciousness is one. They're not of this world. Because you don't find that every day. And I ran into quite a few of them when we were working with Carr. These people would show up and disappear. They'd come in and say, hi, we're just coming by to say hello. And the next thing we know, after a few minutes, they'd be gone. And Carr didn't distinguish, he didn't split them into extraterrestrials and interterrestrials or anything. He said they're all a part of us. They're all inside of us. They're all a part of this greater consciousness. And so, yes, I would say I've met many people. When you meet somebody with love and God in their heart, or higher self is thumping and pouring out at you, yes, I've got to honor that as being not of this world.
Thank you.
So yes, I'd say so. And Marcia had some experiences too. Did you want to tell them about that New York thing?
I was co-ministering a church in Barstow, California, and one of our parishioners was we were talking, and she went on a trip to New York. I knew she was going to be gone. When she came back, she said she started talking to me about something that she said that we talked about in New York. I have still never had any recollection of being in New York, but what she was talking about was things that were actually happening at that time in Barstow, California. That was a pretty amazing experience.
You've never been to New York?
No. Well, I have now, but not then.
Not then.
Wow.
In this world, in this life, no. But I'm sure we've been many places that we're not consciously aware.
And Marcia and I have both found when we absolutely refuse to accept doubt or fear or any of the other negative connotations that might exist in the brain, that a state of knowingness comes in, like knowing I'm hungry, knowing I'm sleepy, instead of guessing of believing in one thing and getting told another. But a state of knowingness enables us to use this creative power there was one time we needed some lychee. It's an Asian fruit. And Marcia and I walked into a 99-cent store, and she said, well, they'd never have it here. We have to go to an international market. And I refused to accept doubt. I just said, no, I know it's here. I'm just matter of fact, no fanfare, no nothing about it. So we went over, we looked in the fruit section, nothing there. We asked the guy, and he said, no, we'd never carried that. And we don't have any. And I went back to the fruit section, and I pulled out some cans, and I started reaching in the back, and I pulled out 4 cans of lychee and put them in our basket. I said I knew they were there. And Marcia was a little surprised, but we've had things like this happening before, so it wasn't. What did you do?
Oh, I reached back in another section in the back and pulled out 1 can of lychee, and Ralph said, see? It's there.
Yeah.
And then we walked around to a vegetable section. He still wanted to get a few more cans. And I said, it's not going to be in the vegetable section. He said, yes, it is. It's right here. And he pulled out 4 more cans.
Yeah.
I think we got 9 cans all
And it was just matter of fact natural. Like, yeah, what else is new? And when we got home and everything, when we talked about it and we remembered it, we said, let me see that receipt. And the receipt said lychee on it.
Wow.
The whole scenario changed by knowing it can, by just willpower or by consciously doing
It's
it.
more than willpower, it's consciousness.
Yeah.
Ralph, in your opinion, does it seem likely to you that on other spheres of existence, and speaking in duality here for a minute, on other planetary spheres, in other parts of the universe, do you think that other beings have figured out this technology without a connection to spirit? Have they done it from that position of duality, or do you need to have an understanding of spirit in order to take this technology and move with it?
No, I think there's no limits as to what the mind can create and what the mind can do. And I'm sure there are cavities or there are places, there are other perhaps planets and and things that have developed technologies along different lines. But the interesting thing is they can't coalesce with the spirit of love. I mean, if they develop them on any other level, they can't infiltrate, they cannot connect, they cannot deal with craft or anything of a lifestyle that has been conceived with love. There's no way they can, they can't come in and fight us. There's no Star Wars going on, in a sense. I don't feel. That's as far as I know, but I do know when Carr talks about love, it is so powerful that, when you're really sincerely in love with your work and your environment or yourself, it excludes all fear, all doubts, and there's nothing that can not even think about penetrating your consciousness unless you let it. If you let down your guard and want to think for a minute that there's a fear or a doubt out there, it can come in, but otherwise it can't. It's up to us.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Love. That's a great. I think that's a great message. It kind of sums up what this whole interview has kind of been circling around.
Exactly.
Well, I'm sorry, guys. I went to an ashram way up in the hills today, and we've been walking through the tulips and everything, and we got up early, and I'm kind of tired, but I hope I did something worthy of your attention.
No, you've definitely done brilliant, beautiful. Thank you very much. If you would allow me just one more question, and then we'll let you go.
Certainly.
Well, as I've mentioned before, we at Wash Your Brain focus on the programming conditioning and how it happens kind of at an early age, usually in the youth. They're filled full of notions that aren't necessarily true, but they believe it. If you were given the chance to educate young people, what would be the most valuable thing, in your opinion, to try and teach them?
To absolutely know themselves beyond belief, know who they really are by not looking externally for any guidance. None. Zero. No guidance externally. Only internally. To look within themselves in their own consciousness. And consciousness will always be there for them when they need it. They will guide them. I built a whole underground house on consciousness. I had no idea what I was doing. But the house built itself because I had faith in what it was doing. And it all came from inside, not outside, because I had no idea. I built a radial house, an underground, round underground house, and the architects at that time wouldn't work from a radius point, and my wife and I had to take a nail and a stick and put it in the ground with a string on it and a box of flour and go out 45 feet and circle it to start digging our first hole. And it was all done with intuition, and it all came from inside. We didn't count on the outside because the architect said, "You're crazy, you're nuts, you'll never succeed." But when we got the house to a completed, well, as far as we got with it, it was fully operational. Everything was operating on free and abundant energy. We had plenty of water. We were using air wells to pull the water out of the air. We were using solar to pull the energy out of the sky. And we lit up the whole mountaintop and at that time we only had a 16 kb computer because that's all there was.
But it was in the early 1980s.
Yeah, 1980.
Wow.
And we had color television, we had water beds, we had everything in gardens. And we wanted to, enlighten people that you don't have. And we built a whole house from garage sales and hunches and feelings that came from our intuition. We built the whole house for $5,000, and it was estimated in those days at over $150,000 at the stage that we got with it. And it was nothing to it. We just met people that wanted to trade, or they wanted to dump something because they were tired of it, or it was just simple. It was very, very simple to follow your intuition. You don't need a lot of baggage. You don't need a lot of ideas and I put academia to rest a long time ago, although I really honor and enjoy reading books, but I don't go back to learning anything from the books anymore because it's too slow.
Yep.
We'd like to thank you for your time, Ralph, and Marcia for helping Ralph during the interview. And if you could please just tell our listeners where they could find your website and any other information you feel that they may benefit from.
Sure, thanks. Okay, well, our website now, and thanks to Mike Hosa in Australia, he's taken on a tremendous task. He's taken over our website. We just didn't know what we were doing, didn't know how to do it, and he offered, and he spent a lot of his time and energy just creating a brilliant website for us. That website is www.bluestarenterprise, all one word, bluestarenterprise.com. He is posting many, many things, not just from us, not just from me, but from a lot of our friends, a lot of our other people that are working in the same consciousness that we are. And he's trying to, like a networker, put people together, introducing one to the other, and it's working incredibly fast. I had my grandson here last night with an interview with Red Ice Creations out of Sweden. My grandson is really, really a brilliant adept. He might be a space being. He wants to work with us as well. So everything's kind of happening. And I put him in touch with all the scientists and people that we're working with. And we're all incredibly filled with joy right now at the times that we're living in and seeing what's happening. For some, it may seem detrimental when something like Japan happens, but there's only good that can come of anything. And in nature, even when dying, which both Martha and I have been through a death experience, in dying there's nothing to it. It's just a matter of consciousness. It only lasts for a few seconds till you realize, oh, that's all it is. Anyway.
That's right.
Okay, I'll stop.
No, thank you very much. That was beautiful. Again, thank you for your time. And when you start flying those spaceships around, Earth spaceships, please let us know. We would love to come bring a video camera and help you show everyone.
All right. Well, we may be able to come over and see you. They're going to be, before the end of the year, you're going to see things that you can't even imagine perhaps right now. But it's all going to happen before the end of the year. Lots of it. Anyway, and even if it doesn't, we'll build one, come over and pick you up and take you for a ride.
Thank you.
All right.
Enjoy the trips.
Thank you, and thank you
so much. It's been an honor just talking with you, and it's really enlightening. Thank you so much.
And again, thank you, Marcia, for helping him, because it was a long haul. So.
You're very welcome.
We love you guys. Keep looking up.
Thank you so much.
It's on the horizon, just waiting. Thank you, and bless all of you guys.
Hey, Ralph.
For now.
Wait.
Yes.
Ralph, if I wanted to email you from here on out, do you have your contact email there at Blue Star Enterprise?
Yes. Thank you for asking. And this goes for anybody that cares to email me. Even though I'm getting about 150 to 200 a day, but I will get around to answering them eventually. It's Vortex, small case, Vortex spelled with a V for Victor, VORTEXXX, 3 X's, followed by the number 3, at AOL.com.
Excellent. That's Vortex with 3 X's followed by the number 3 at AOL.com.
Right, and anybody that cares to contact me, if you'll be patient with me, I'll get back to you. I don't know always when, and it might be very brief, but and I love you for asking for that.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Bye-bye for now.
You have been listening to a Wash Your Brain collective public service announcement. We can be found via podcast on iTunes and by visiting us at washyourbrain.org and subscribing to our RSS feed. We hope that you have enjoyed our most recent broadcast, and we'd like to remind you, it is within you to deprogram your mind and liberate yourself from the manipulation that takes place every day through the system of mind control. Knowledge is power, and it can help to eliminate fear. We thank you for joining us on this journey to free those minds that are currently being distracted and to empower the spirit of all members of the human family. We hope that you share this important message with others as this journey is yours. Together we can remember who we really are and breathe new life into that which they have worked so hard to program, our world. By remembering who we are and our true significance, we can learn to love ourselves and create the harmony we wish to see in the world. free from all fear and control. Please visit us again next week to listen to another unique perspective that we hope aids in the knowing and protecting of your rights. Love yourself. We love you. Thank you for tuning in, and take care of you for us. We're with you.